Have you ever watched a top-tier athlete just completely dominate a game? Or maybe a visionary CEO navigating a massive crisis with, total calm, and you thought to yourself, man, they just have a gift I don't. Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to completely dismantle this whole idea of innate talent. We're going to give you the exact blueprint to upgrade your mental operating system, drawing on some truly fascinating source material that completely reframes how the top 1% in business, sports, and leadership actually achieve the seemingly impossible. So let's dive right into this massive question right off the bat. Is the top 1% just born different? Because the research, it points to a resounding no. Most people think peak performers just won the genetic lottery, right? That they've got better natural skills or inherent talent. But the data shows elite performers are absolutely not born with better hardware. They just run fundamentally different software. They don't just act differently. They process information, they evaluate risk, and they react to failure in ways that would honestly seem completely alien to the average person. They've literally rewired their reactions from the ground up, and that is exactly what we're going to decode for you. We're going to treat your brain like the ultimate performance machine. Here is the blueprint we'll follow. First, the myth of natural talent. Second, upgrading the hardware. Third, installing the software. Fourth, the stress test. Fifth, the paradox of strategic rest. And finally, engineering your legacy.
Okay, part 1, the myth of natural talent.
Think about how you instinctively react to a massive setback. Average performers naturally avoid pain, right? They take failure personally, often thinking, I'm just not good enough at this. It essentially becomes this huge identity crisis. Elite minds, on the flip side, deliberately seek out discomfort because they deeply understand that comfort is the enemy of growth. To an elite mind, failure is not a blow to the ego. It's just data. Literally just data. Instead of feeling that awful punch to the gut when something goes wrong, they process it straight through the rational prefrontal cortex. So it's never I failed. It's always, okay, this specific tactic didn't work. So what's the next variable I need to test?
Moving right along to part 2, upgrading the hardware.
So this crucial point revolves around neuroplasticity. Your brain is neuroplastic. Think of your brain like a bustling, dynamic city grid. Every single time you practice a skill or adopt a new way of thinking, it's like you're paving a dirt path into a massive superhighway. And conversely, the paths you stop using, well, they eventually get overgrown and just fade away. Every single thought you think and every skill you practice is quite literally sculpting your physical brain structure. In fact, when researchers scan the brains of elite athletes or Fortune 500 CEOs, they actually find physically enhanced regions for things like spatial awareness or pattern recognition, meaning an elite mind is built, not born. Period.
All right, part 3, installing the software. Now that we've got the hardware primed, we need to install the software. These are the cognitive frameworks that elite performers use to process information. Top performers definitely don't rely on gut feelings or limited past experiences. Nope, they stack specific mental models. Let's break a few of these down. Instead of reasoning by analogy, doing things just because, well, that's how it's always been done, they use first principles thinking. They boil a really complex problem down to its most basic, undeniable truths, and then build a totally new solution from the ground up. They also use inversion. Instead of asking, how do I succeed, they ask, okay, what are all the ways I could completely destroy this project? And then they actively avoid those exact pitfalls. By constantly stacking these models, like asking, and then what, through second-order thinking, they anticipate consequences that the rest of us completely miss.
But before we talk about how they focus this software, I want you to let this number sink in. 96. That is exactly how many times the average person checks their phone every single day. Crazy, right? And as a direct result of that constant context switching, the average human attention span has dwindled to a mere 8 seconds. Seriously, 8 seconds. If you can train yourself to hold deep, unbroken focus, you instantly separate yourself from 99% of the distracted population. In a world practically designed to fragment your attention, the ability to concentrate is truly the ultimate competitive advantage. To run this new mental software efficiently, you absolutely have to eliminate multitasking. Neuroscience proves that divided attention just destroys performance. Every time you switch tasks, you leave behind what researchers call attention residue. Think about, say, checking a really stressful email right in the middle of writing a complex report. Even when you go back to writing, a fraction of your brain is still stressing out about that email. That residue acts exactly like apps running in the background of your phone, just rapidly draining your cognitive battery. Elite focus requires brutal, uncompromising single tasking.
Which brings us to part 4, the stress test. So, what actually happens to this upgraded machine when the pressure is absolutely crushing? When the stakes are super high, most of us feel our chest tighten, our vision gets narrow. That is the biological threat response. It's that classic fight or flight mode that floods your body with cortisol and heavily impairs complex, rational thinking. But elite minds, they cognitively reframe that exact same physical sensation. They feel the racing heart and the adrenaline, for sure, but they don't interpret it as panic. They interpret it as readiness. By focusing on what they can gain rather than what they might lose, they shift into a challenge response. This cognitive shift actually alters their physiology, heightening their focus and enhancing cognitive function exactly when they need it the most.
By mastering that stress test, they unlock what is arguably the holy grail of human performance, flow state. Now, this isn't some mystical, elusive feeling. It's actually a highly engineerable formula. First, it requires the perfect balance of a challenge that stretches your skills just right to the edge of your current abilities. Second, you need crystal clear targets paired with immediate feedback. Why immediate? Because your brain needs to instantly know if it's on the right track so it can micro-correct without breaking its rhythm. And third, it demands absolute 100% unbroken concentration on the task at hand. When you perfectly align those three variables and hit flow, a truly fascinating neurological shift happens. It's a state called transient hypofrontality. Let's break that down. Transient meaning temporary, and hypofrontality meaning a literal dialing down of the prefrontal cortex. That nagging inner critic that constantly second-guesses your every move, it goes completely offline. And without that conscious interference, time physically alters, feeling like it's either slowing down or speeding up, and your brain's pattern recognition goes into absolute hyperdrive, creating that incredible feeling of effortless execution. All right, on to part 5, the paradox of strategic rest. Now, here is a massive wait-what moment that completely breaks modern hustle culture. Elite performers don't recover despite their ambition. They recover because of it. Grinding constantly without a break actually leads to what's called recovery debt, which forces a massive degradation in your performance over time. So strategic rest is not a sign of weakness or a lack of drive. It is a vital, non-negotiable performance multiplier. There's incredibly vital hidden work happening when you rest. When you step away from the desk or the field, your brain isn't just shutting off. Not at all. It is actively consolidating short-term learning into long-term memory, growing new neural pathways, and regulating stress hormones. Crucially, taking a break activates the default mode network. This is the background processing system of your brain that connects seemingly entirely disparate ideas. It's the exact reason why your very best ideas often hit you when you're taking a shower or just going for a walk. If you don't strategically step away, you are literally preventing your brain from physically adapting to support higher levels of performance. And finally, part 6, engineering your legacy. Elite minds don't just set vague, inspiring goals, they engineer incredibly compelling, emotionally charged visions for the future. And they do this through multiple timeline integration. They effectively reverse engineer their lives. They map out the ultimate 5-year identity they want to achieve, step that back to figure out the strategic pathways needed over the next year, and then distill that all the way down to what they must execute today, in the next 30 days. There's zero guessing here. Every single daily tactical action perfectly aligns with the person they are evolving into 5 years from now. This multi-timeline approach builds into true legacy. Let's look at the contrast in mindsets. Average focus is completely obsessed with extracting value. Getting the promotion, hitting the quarterly quota, chasing that individual achievement. But the elite mental operating system shifts to contributing value. They build systems, they mentor teams, and they create powerful frameworks that will continue to generate results long after they've personally left the room. They elevate way beyond mere personal success by prioritizing robust systems over short-term outcomes, effectively building a legacy that outlasts their individual involvement. So we've given you the blueprint used by the world's highest performers from our source material. You know the hardware, you've seen the software, and you understand the systems. So the only question left is this. Will you remain a passive consumer of this explainer, or will you take these frameworks and actively engineer your own elite mind? The upgrade is available right now. Are you ready to install it?